January 15th, 1947, Los Angeles. It's 10 o'clock in the morning, and housewife Betty Bersinger leaves home to run a few errands. While walking down Norton Avenue in the neighborhood of Leimert Park, she sees something unusual: a discarded mannequin lying in an empty lot. Betty knows it can't possibly be a human for two reasons. Firstly, the skin is far too pale. Secondly, the figure is in two pieces, like a mannequin someone had disassembled and dumped. The legs were spread open in an awkward pose, the arms stretched out and up over the head. Betty Bersinger must have thought it a strange sight on a Wednesday morning in suburban Los Angeles, but as she got closer to the abandoned lot, her mouth fell open in mute horror. It wasn't a mannequin at all. It was a woman, or what remained of one. A woman who had obviously died horribly and been disposed of right next to a sidewalk, somewhere she was certain to be discovered, to cause shock, fear, and disgust. Officers arrived to find one of the most gruesome crime scenes in American history. The victim was lying face up in the grass, naked. She'd been expertly bisected at the waist, her organs removed and concealed under her lower body. Her mouth had been slashed from the edges of her lips to her ears, and a large chunk of her right breast was missing. The reason she was so pale was that her body had been drained of all blood. There was no blood at the scene, except for a watery trace amount found in an empty cement mix bag nearby. The autopsy would reveal that the victim had died of cerebral hemorrhage, a result of blows to the head. The killer had obviously taken the victim's life somewhere else, operated on the body, cleaned it, then posed it in this vacant lot in a sleepy borough in South LA for effect. But who and why? Forensic science was very limited in 1947. Police had almost nothing to go on. They couldn't know this was only the beginning of the Black Dahlia case, the most infamous unsolved murder in Hollywood history. The coming decades would turn up hundreds of suspects, but no serious answers would emerge until 50 years later, when an LAPD detective discovered the killer may have been his own father. But as we'll see, that theory raises even more disturbing questions about Hollywood power brokers and the police themselves. A few days after the body was discovered in the vacant lot, Phoebe Short of Boston, Massachusetts received an unusual phone call. The man on the other end of the line identified himself as a reporter for the Los Angeles Examiner. He told Phoebe that her daughter Elizabeth had just won a beauty pageant and asked if he could have some background information for a profile he was writing about her. Phoebe likely wasn't surprised. Her 22-year-old daughter was indeed a great beauty, with curly black hair and striking ice blue eyes. The reporter peppered Phoebe with questions, jotting down as much information about Elizabeth as he could. When he had everything he wanted, he bluntly told Phoebe the truth. Elizabeth Short hadn't won a beauty pageant. She'd been brutally killed, dismembered, and dumped in an empty lot by an unknown assailant. The press was all over the murder from the beginning. A mysterious, beautiful girl, a horrific crime scene. It was the kind of story reporters would, well, kill for. It was front-page news for 35 days after the body was found. Although the FBI were quickly able to identify the victim as Elizabeth Short, the press dubbed her the Black Dahlia, and the name stuck. Sleazy reporters described her appearance in lurid detail and made all kinds of insinuations about the type of woman she was. But if we want to understand what happened to Elizabeth, who did it, and why, we need to separate fact from fiction. Here's the truth about her life, as far as anyone can tell. Elizabeth Short was born in Boston in 1924. Her father was a retired Navy man who designed mini golf courses. Her mother was a homemaker. Elizabeth's father was financially ruined when the stock market crashed in 1929. In 1930, police found his car abandoned on a bridge and concluded that he'd jumped. In 1942, the family received a mysterious letter. It was from Elizabeth's father. He confessed that he'd staged his own death in order to run away and start a new life. At 18, Elizabeth moved to California to reside with him, although she hadn't seen him since she was a small child. The pair fought constantly, and within 2 months, Elizabeth had moved out on her own. In 1943, she was arrested for underage drinking and her fingerprints were taken. fingerprints that would be used to identify her body just 4 years later. Elizabeth ended up in Florida, where she became involved with a major in the Air Force. The two were engaged to be married, but he died in a plane crash in the Pacific in 1945. In 1946, Elizabeth returned to California to visit with another male friend. This time she would stay for good. In the months leading up to her death, Elizabeth took a job as a waitress and lived in a small apartment above a nightclub on Hollywood Boulevard. Her appearance, plethora of male friends, and the salacious reporting on her death led many to believe she was an escort. She may have been, but there's no real evidence to support it. Her autopsy also revealed that she was not and never had been pregnant. It's also often said that Elizabeth was an actress or an aspiring actress. Again, this may be true, but there's no evidence that she ever worked as an actor or even tried to. However, Elizabeth's alleged ties to seedy members of the Hollywood elite would come to light later, and may help explain her tragic fate. The last known person to see Elizabeth alive was Robert Manley, a married salesman with whom she'd been having an affair. The pair took a trip to San Diego and back, before Manley dropped her off in front of the Biltmore Hotel in downtown LA on January 9th, never to see her again. 6 days later, Betty Bersinger would find Elizabeth's body in the empty lot on Norton Avenue. 6 days after that, the case would be blown wide open, by the killer himself. On January 21, 1947, a man claiming to be the perpetrator called the Los Angeles Examiner to congratulate them on their fine reporting. He promised to send them some of the Black Dahlia's possessions. 3 days later, he made good on his promise. An envelope arrived containing Elizabeth Short's business cards, her birth certificate, some pictures, and an address book with the name Mark Hansen on the cover. The sender attached a note to the envelope, saying, "Here is Dahlia's belongings. Letter to follow." That same day, a suspicious handbag and shoe were recovered in an alleyway near where Elizabeth's body was found. Like her body, the handbag, the shoe, and the package containing her belongings had all been wiped with gasoline to remove fingerprints. This detail convinced police that the man taunting them really was the killer. The mysterious envelope provided the LAPD with their first genuine suspect, Mark Hansen, whose address book was inexplicably included with Elizabeth Short's possessions. This was also the first clue that Elizabeth had some connection to the shady underbelly of Hollywood society. Hansen was a wealthy man who owned several nightclubs and theaters in LA. Elizabeth's roommate, Ann Toth, told police that Hansen was an acquaintance of theirs. Elizabeth had reportedly stayed with friends at Hansen's estate, but she'd rebuffed his attempts to sleep with her. An exotic dancer who was friends with Elizabeth told police she liked to get guys worked up over her, but she'd leave them hanging dry. As a matter of fact, police quickly cleared Hansen. After all, why would the killer send the press his address book? They also cleared Elizabeth's lover, Robert Manley. The supposed killer sent follow-up letters to the press, promising to reveal himself, then reneging. He claimed the murder was justified. He boasted. He bluffed. Police chased down hundreds of leads and interviewed hundreds of suspects, but every one turned out to be a dead end. Eventually, the Black Dahlia stopped being front-page news. The case went cold. But the shocking death of Elizabeth Short has never been far beneath the surface of public consciousness. In the 73 years since her passing, there have been many theories about what really happened to her and the identity of her killer. Let's take a look at some of the proposed suspects. 2 months after the Black Dahlia murder, a caretaker made a chilling discovery in Venice Beach. At the water's edge, he found men's clothes, apparently abandoned. A coat, a t-shirt, trousers, underwear. Inside a shoe, the caretaker found a strange note, which read, "To whom it may concern, I have waited for the police to capture me for the Black Dahlia killing, but have not. I am too much of a coward to turn myself in, so this is the best way out for me. I couldn't help myself for that, or this. Sorry, Mary." Police were unable to identify the owner of the clothing, and no body was ever recovered. It's possible the unidentified Venice Beach man really was the perpetrator. However, Over the decades, literally hundreds of men have confessed to the crime, including some who weren't even born when it took place. Hundreds of people have also accused fathers, brothers, husbands, uncles, and other random men of being the killer. Another suspect came to renewed attention in 2023, Dr. Patrick Shane O'Reilly. O'Reilly was a Los Angeles surgeon, a fact which fits with the long-standing theory that the killer had medical training due to the meticulous manner in which she was bisected. O'Reilly also shared mutual friends with Elizabeth, including Mark Hansen. Furthermore, Dr. O'Reilly had assaulted his secretary in 1939. Interestingly, Dr. O'Reilly was also missing a portion of his right breast, an injury remarkably similar to the one found on Elizabeth Short's body. But what has really sparked interest in O'Reilly is the discovery that he repeatedly lied to authorities when he was interrogated. O'Reilly's real name was Patrick Trier, and it turns out he had an extensive history of using false names and planting misleading stories in the press. But now we come to the main suspect, an even creepier doctor with connections to both the LA underworld and the elite, Dr. George Hill Hodel Jr. As a child, Hodel was a musical prodigy with an IQ of 186. He graduated high school at the age of 15 and pursued a university education at Caltech. However, he was forced to leave the school after impregnating a professor's wife. Hodel eventually completed his medical degree, ran a successful practice, and became the head of LA's Social Hygiene Bureau, responsible for things like birth control and treating venereal disease. This is how George Hodel quietly became one of the most powerful men in Los Angeles. He began performing very personal medical treatments for police, politicians, celebrities, treatments that these powerful people very much wanted to keep secret. By the 1940s, Hodel was living the life of a rich Hollywood doctor, befriending people like actor-director John Huston and the surrealist artist Man Ray. Hodel was attracted to the dark sensibilities present in much surrealist art. His womanizing fit him right in with the celebrities and crooked politicians he rubbed shoulders with. In 1945, Hodel moved into the famous Soden House, an odd LA mansion designed by Lloyd Wright. There he lived an essentially polygamous lifestyle, and ultimately came to have 8 children by 4 different women. In the wake of the Black Dahlia murder, Hodel was questioned by police. Multiple witnesses confirmed that Hodel had had a relationship with Elizabeth Short in the months leading up to her death. Hodel became an even more serious suspect when he was accused of assault in 1949. His secretary Ruth Spalding also died in suspicious circumstances around this time. Hodel beat the assault charge, but he was on the radar of the Los Angeles DA. They decided to bug his home in 1950, and they got him on tape saying some seriously damning things. Most notably, "Supposin' I did kill the Black Dahlia. They can't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary anymore because she's dead. They thought there was something fishy. Anyway, now they may have figured it out. Killed her. Maybe I did kill my secretary." A few weeks later, Hodel fled LA. For the next 40 years, he lived primarily in the Philippines. So, given the evidence, why wasn't George Hodel investigated more seriously? The answer is that no one knew any of this until 1999. It was buried in a file in the Los Angeles DA's office. Steve Hodel, George's son and a retired homicide detective, discovered the file after his father's death. He became convinced that his father was the killer, that he had perpetrated the Black Dahlia slaying and posed the body as a sick work of surrealist art. There's one more disturbing detail linking George Hodel to the Black Dahlia, and offering an explanation as to why he was never tried. In 2018, a woman found a letter written by her grandfather, who had worked for the LAPD Internal Affairs, the division that investigates police corruption. The letter explained how the police knew the Black Dahlia killer was a man with the initials GH, and that GH had also killed another woman named Louise Springer. However, corrupt LAPD officers let GH go because he was under their protection. Whether or not George Hodel was guilty, we can never know for sure. The tragic death of Elizabeth Short remains officially unsolved, sadly, as so often, we're left with more questions than answers. What do you think? Let us know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, leave us a like and subscribe to History Snob for more tales from the past. Thanks for watching.